Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm pleased to present AB 2303. This is a bill that seeks to generate new revenue for programs like preschool and after-school programs in our state. It recognizes that there is a nexus with the high rate of incarceration in our state. In particular, it takes a look at the practice of using private prisons in our state and the amount of money that the state of California spends on incarceration services for companies that are for-profit. This bill places a 10% tax on private for-profit prison companies that contract with the state and profit off of mass incarceration. Mass incarceration is big business for private prisons because California spends huge amounts to incarcerate prisoners. In 2017, the active contracts for for-profit companies totaled $4.5 billion. In comparison, the state spends relatively little on early education and after-school programs that we know will prevent incarceration in the first place. This bill supports proactive incarceration prevention by raising approximately $25 million in annual revenue for preschool and after-school programs. Attempts at reducing our prison population typically focus on recidivism or sentencing reduction instead of also addressing the root of the systemic prison pipeline. This bill changes that trend, providing crucial funding for programs that reduce the likelihood of an individual coming into contact with the criminal justice system in the first place. Additionally, this bill addresses critical funding issues related to early education by providing a revenue stream for early childhood education that is insulated from the annual budget volatility that we experience. AB 2303 includes a number of protective measures that will help ensure that the cost of the tax is not passed on to the state. That language that has been included is such as the following: requiring contracting companies to certify under penalty of perjury that the cost is not being passed along to the state, calls for oversight and potential audit by the Attorney General, the institution of civil fines for companies found to be violators, fines as well that are deposited into the fund, further increasing the amount of available money for incarceration prevention. Private prisons companies have been reaping large profits even as they face accusations of inmate mistreatment and prison mismanagement. There's an ongoing lawsuit over inmate conditions with lawyers for the ACLU and the Southern Poverty Law Center, alleging that medical care is substandard and inmates are often being denied food. Further, late last year, these companies were found to partner with retailers to extort shoplifters into taking a re-education course costing hundreds of dollars or face jail time. This bill makes private prison management less profitable while generating funds for early education. With me today to testify and add emphasis on this bill is Aaron Gable, representing First Five, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Hi, Erin Gable on behalf of First Five California, the State Commission, as well as a board member for the Partnership for Children and Youth. And I just want to thank the author and to the committee for not only thinking about how to find more revenues for the crucial legislative priorities of early learning and expanded learning, but also for this priority of finding the nexus between the opportunity gap in the first years of life and our incarceration rate here in California. The brain science and the conclusive national research outlines why and how the opportunity gap becomes our achievement gap in our K-12 schools, which then is expanded by a lack of opportunity into our high school dropout rates, which ultimately leads to our incredible incarceration rates. California must begin with strategic investments proven by research to reduce these incarceration rates by going upstream. We need to invest in high-quality childcare and preschool in the first 5 years of life when 90% of the brain development is occurring and the architecture for an entire child's future is at stake. That opportunity gap here in California currently means that only 14% of our babies have access to high-quality childcare when 80% of their brain development is occurring. Only 38% of our eligible 3-year-olds have access to preschool. We also need to be looking at how to invest and continue to expand investments in California's historic expanded learning programs, addressing the summer learning loss, summer learning gaps, and the lack of access to after-school programs, which give children a both safe and learning place to be. We spend currently more on for-profit prisons than we do on all of early learning in California, and that's a trend that needs to stop. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Jennifer Baker with the California Teachers Association. Pleased to be able to support this important legislation to really help to close the school-to-prison pipeline. As was noted earlier, our earliest learners have an opportunity gap that we want to make sure that we start at the beginning of their educational career so that they have opportunities to succeed. So many of our children have not had those opportunities. We believe this important measure would help to provide the opportunities that they so dearly need.
Madam Chair and members, Brian Howe with the California Federation of Teachers. We're in strong support. Thank you.
Other witnesses in support?
Good afternoon. I'm Mona Kazemi with the California Alternative Payment Program Association, and we're in support.
Brian Blakely, representing the California Tax Reform Association, in support.
Witnesses in opposition?
We're not together anymore. We're not together anymore.
Madam Chair, members, good afternoon. David Wolf with the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association opposed AB 2303 today. Members, we're obviously in favor of early learning programs and protecting against future recidivism rates and all those things, but imposing a tax on private prisons that contract out with vendors is inappropriate and potentially very damaging for small business. According to the Legislative Analyst's Office, and Mr. Thurmond noted this, it does cost a lot to house an inmate in California prisons. $71,000 to house an inmate for 1 year, which is more than the tuition rate at Harvard University. It seems like that alone should be sufficient rationale to continue contracting out more services instead of stifling the economic growth by taxing it, and taxing a lot of, again, the majority of these vendors are small businesses. And again, Mr. Thurmond mentioned that the vendor would have to certify under penalty of perjury that any costs as a result of the tax would not be passed on to the state. How are you going to prove this? That would be the question I have. It's impossible to prove, and it's going to serve as yet another disincentive for these vendors to contract out. So for those reasons, ask for a no vote.
Other witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, questions and comments from the committee? Mr. Thurmond, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We simply believe that companies that are profiting off of the state of California have a responsibility to help to prevent further incarceration. We think that this bill is creative in its approach to prevent costs from being passed on to the state, and recognizing that there is a nexus between programs like preschool, which prevent young people from entering the criminal justice system in the first place. This creates a new revenue source to help get there, and we respectfully ask for the aye vote of this committee.